Today, we're going to dive deep into the philosophy behind one of heavy metal's most iconic albums, Metallica's Black Album, or as I like to call it, the last all-killer, no-filler Metallica album. So let's get started. Welcome, metalheads. I'm the host of Heavy Metal Philosophy and writer for Metal Digest, John Barbas. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode for this week's Riff of the Week. We're analyzing Metallica's 1991 self-titled album, and as always, the historical time period that the album was written in and recorded affects not only the aesthetic, but also the sound of that record. Think about the culture at the time. The Black Album was released after the Reagan administration, during Bush Sr.'s administration, but most importantly, it was the follow-up to their 1988 album, And Justice for All. And unlike me, the band didn't like that album. There's many interviews where they've gone on record saying that they thought that the songs were too long, and so they ran in the complete opposite direction. A lot of OG Metallica fans will say that this is the album where Metallica sold out, but I wholeheartedly disagree. At least I don't think it was intentional. Yes, it's true that the Black Album changed their fortunes. They went from being one of the big kind of metal bands to the biggest rock band on the planet. But if you listen to interviews about why certain decisions were made and you look at the events leading up to the recording of the album, I could make arguments that they were going for a certain direction. They weren't intentionally trying to go mainstream. They weren't thinking, this is the album that's going to make us pop stars. It just so happened to do that. And then everything else that came after is a consequence of that. Let's take the opening track, Enter Sandman. This is the song. This is the song that launched Metallica into the stratosphere. But I don't think that they wrote this thinking this is going to be our big hit. In fact, they didn't even really like the song. They thought it was cheesy. It was the last song on the album to get lyrics, and they went through iterations there because they weren't happy with it.
I didn't think Enter Sandman was such a great song. I think Lars and Bob Rock said, go back. I challenge you to go back and work on it. And I did.
The song was originally going to be about sudden infant death syndrome, but they wisely decided that that probably wasn't a good idea.
I had an idea that it was going to be about crib death, where, the kids just die, and it wasn't mysterious enough, so it was more about the Sandman, which is a kind of a folklore in the United States, at least.
And I think what they wound up changing it to, what they wound up settling on, is what helped that song become the mainstream success that it is. I just don't think that a song about crib death is really going to get as much radio play and MTV rotation as that song did. But instead, they just made vague allusions to evil. We're all a little bit drawn to darkness. It's human nature. Even non-metalheads like Halloween and horror movies. Even with that innate human characteristic, normies aren't as willing to go as far into the darkness as we metalheads are. Enter Sandman has just enough of the macabre to scratch that itch without going so far to push the normies away. Plus, it has this imagery that harkens back to our childhood that we've all had laying in the bed in the dark and our childhood fears of what may be in it. Hush, little baby, don't say a word, and never mind that noise you heard. It's just the beast under your bed, in your closet, in your head. And also, let me just say right here, thank God for Stranger Things, because all my life, if you wanted to hear Metallica, if you requested Metallica, people would play Enter Sandman. And I got really sick of that song really fast. They've got way more and better songs than Enter Sandman. Thanks to Stranger Things, now I think that Metallica is rightfully known for Master of Puppets by the normies instead of Enter Sandman. We could really spend the whole episode talking about the impact of Enter Sandman alone, but let's move on to Sad But True, shall we? To me, This is the stomper of the album. It's an all-time great song. Let's dive into the meaning a little bit. I think that this song is about the inner self, the inner darker self, to be more precise, that Jungian shadow self. The subject's inner monologue says, I'm your life, they betray. I'm your only true friend now. And then later, the same subject says, you're my mask, my cover, my shelter. You're the one that's blamed. So even though the subject of the song is trying to hide from society that darker inner self, it matters not, because he still has to bear with the consequences. It's sad but true. The next song, Holier Than Thou, is pretty self-explanatory, but I just gotta say, this one was really powerful to me as a kid. If you've listened to this podcast before, then you know that I grew up in an evangelical Christian household. So this one had a lot of meaning to me. It was very cathartic, as I was grappling with whether or not I actually believed, and as I was raging against the systems of control that I was encountering, trying to get me to come into line. This song really helped me a lot. Before you judge me, take a look at you. Can't you find something better to do? Point the finger, slow to understand. Arrogance and ignorance go hand in hand. And with that evangelical Christian background in mind, the Unforgiven really spoke to me as a child as well, because in my childhood, I was often either berated or downright struck by adults to try to get me to conform, to fall in line. Constant pain, disgrace. The young boy learns their rules. Or how about this line? They dedicate all their lives to running all of his. He tries to please them all, this bitter man he is. Wherever I May Roam also really spoke to me as a kid, and even now as an adult it's really powerful, but back then I was a military brat, so we moved all the time. I never sat down roots anywhere, and then as a young adult I became a working musician, and the road was just kind of a way of life. I'm free to speak my mind anywhere, never mind anywhere. Wherever I may roam, where I lay my head is home. These lines in particular are powerful to me because if you're constantly on the move, you really can say whatever you want because you're just going to leave anyway. The consequences be damned. But if you're in a stable community with roots, that community is somewhat, no matter how much you try and fight it, is somewhat going to temper you as you find equilibrium in that community. And then there's Don't Tread on Me. I think this is the first signs of James expressing who we've come to know him as now. When Metallica was young, they wrote a lot of anti-war songs, and it was more from that sort of approach. But as James got older and he got into guns and hunting and hot rods and his circles changed a little bit, well, now we have one of the most libertarian songs in metal. And this followed by maybe their most existential song ever, Through the Never. This song is full of references to the vastness of the universe and also our pursuit of knowledge, but the futility of that pursuit given the nature of infinity. But at the same time, we can't not pursue that knowledge because, to quote the song, we hunger to be alive. All that is, was, and will be. The universe much too big to see. Time and space never ending. Disturbing thoughts, questions pending, limitations of human understanding. And then we don't really need to analyze Nothing Else Matters, do we? We all know that this is a song about missing your loved ones while you're traveling. But while we're on the subject, let's just appreciate what a masterpiece this song is. And don't take my word for it. Who has more authority to say that this song is an all-time great more than Sir Elton John?
And listen, this is one of the best songs ever written to me. I mean, it's just,
yes,
it's a song that never gets old. And playing on this track, I just couldn't wait. Metallica are probably, the creme de la creme of those kind of bands. You can't really define them. Not a heavy metal band; they're a musical band.
And it's really brilliant to follow Nothing Else Matters with Of Wolf and Man, because that opening riff has the perfect energy to get you right back into it, headbanging right away. In interviews, Jason said that Lars is the one that determined the song order, and it really shows his strategic mind. I really think that the song order of this album really helps keep it moving. And I also think it's kind of clever to follow a really personal song like Nothing Else Matters with a song that you can argue really doesn't have much of a meaning. But then again, we can always look past the surface. James was often inspired by books. The song One on Injustice for All was inspired by Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo, and it could be argued that this song was inspired by Call of the Wild by Jack London, because there's several lines in this song that are kind of similar to certain lines in the book. Earth's Gift, back to the meaning of life. And then also that Call of the Wild, of Wolf and Man, yeah. And then following that is The God That Failed, and in my mind there's really no debate about whether this one has deep meaning or not. You know, this one is James raging against his religious upbringing, which he blamed for the death of his mother. His family were Christian Scientists, which is just a whole other level of fundamentalist Christian. That sect didn't believe in going to the doctor. They believed that if you were sick or injured, that God would heal you if that was his will. So when his mother came down with cancer and they didn't go to the doctor, that's what he blamed on her death. And with that in mind, the following two songs, My Friend of Misery and The Struggle Within, really come in sharp relief. These times are sent to try men's souls. But there's something wrong with all you see. You take it on all yourself, but remember, misery loves company. When I think about these lines in My Friend of Misery, in context, following The God That Failed, in my mind is images of a childhood James struggling after the death of his mother, feeling alone and helpless. And, also it has to be said, yes, My Friend of Misery may not be like one of the famous Metallica songs, like For Whom the Bell Tolls, but I think any list of the best Metallica songs, My Friend of Misery should be on that list somewhere, because both musically and lyrically, I think this song is just elite. And then to close the record with The Struggle Within, I feel is a statement. I really feel that this song could encapsulate the rest of Metallica's career going forward. Pretty much ever since Ride the Lightning, the song started getting more personal. James started putting his feelings to paper as catharsis. There was still some songs with outside influence, like maybe Fuel, but there's not as many songs like The Thing That Should Not Be. And then, of course, Saint Anger became kind of a therapy album, but that's a subject for another episode. So instead of diving into that, let's talk about the riff of the week. And as you all know, I'm terrified to play Metallica's music on my show in fear of being seen by the copyright gods and struck down without mercy. So we're going to do something a little different, as we always do when we talk about Metallica. But hey, if you enjoyed this analysis, I've got other Philosophy of Metallica episodes. And if you're on YouTube, you can just click right here to catch one of those. Tell me what you think about the analysis. What other bands would you like me to do this for? But most importantly, read philosophy, listen to metal. I love you.